Okay, Assalamu alaikum everybody. So today we're going to carry on our session from last week. So this is part 2 of the session on pre-diabetes or diabetes. For those of you who were here last week, we went through, and I'll just quickly go through the slides, and we ended up with a tool that we were using to assess our own risk of pre-diabetes or diabetes. So last week we were focusing on identifying the problem early, and today hopefully we'll close the circle, because the reason for identifying it early is because there are things we can do to prevent the onset of diabetes, and as we were alluding to last week, actually things that you can do to start reversing the process of diabetes, even established diabetes. And I think today I was hoping to just have more of a discussion, more of a discussion when we get to the end of this. So the talk itself will be quite brief. Has everybody seen this before? Can I just pass it round to those of you who haven't seen these? Has anyone seen this? Okay, so for somebody who was here last week, can we just have somebody who can just explain what we mean when we're talking about pre-diabetes? It's a very simple question.
Just before actual diabetes sets in, so you're at risk of getting that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's on the scale of abnormal blood sugar, and it's on the way towards established diabetes. But we know there's already consequences to the health. There's already the effects of sugar in the vessels. So it actually itself is a problem. It's not just a precursor to a problem. It itself is a problem. So last week we talked a little bit about diabetes. I'm just going to go through the slides here quickly. We went through the definition, and we said that we were talking about type 2 diabetes. So we said that the two molecules which are important are insulin and glucose. And in the bloodstream, we have a lot of glucose that comes in the blood once you've eaten a meal. And inside the cell, it's protected with a cell wall. And there's lots of gates or doors in the cell wall. And insulin is the thing that comes and opens the gates. So it facilitates glucose to go inside the cell. In type 1 diabetes, you don't have the insulin, so all the gates are closed, and it becomes a problem. You get a build-up of sugar in the blood. And in type 2 diabetes, the gates are resistant to insulin. We call insulin resistance. And then you get build-up of sugar in the blood, and you also get less sugar going into the cell where it needs to go. So because of this, the build-up of sugar in the blood is very toxic, and we know that it causes all sorts of problems. We talked about a lot of problems last week, but some of the main sort of key ones are things like blindness, kidney failure, heart disease, because it's so toxic, it's running around in your blood vessels, and it can cause this kind of trouble, this and more. We talked a little bit about the signs of diabetes, and we said that with a high concentration of sugar in the blood, it's so toxic the body wants to get rid of it. So it makes you go to the toilet more to get rid of all the glucose. It makes you feel more thirsty, so you can have more water and try to dilute down the sugar to make it less toxic. And also, because the sugar can't get inside the cells, it means the cells can't really function fully, and so people feel this fatigue. And we said that even if you're noticing these signs and you think you're going to catch diabetes, the diagnosis early, by the time you've got these signs, unfortunately, it's already having consequences on the body. So we need to catch it ideally a stage earlier than this. We talked about what comes before diabetes, which is pre-diabetes, and we said this is the scale. And this is what Shabiranko was alluding to. So pre-diabetes, the green is a normal blood sugar level. Pre-diabetes is kind of the orange level. So it is a higher than normal blood sugar. It is still toxic, and still there are damage is being done, but it is before diabetes. And the key thing is here that people know that pre-diabetes is reversible or can be stopped. You can stop people from going down the slippery slope. But actually, more evidence is saying that actually diabetes itself is more reversible. So we'll just briefly touch on that. We talked about the risks and how prevalent it is, and we said particularly in our community, there's probably an 8-fold increase risk because of our genetics, because of socioeconomic class, because of where we are in the UK. So even if you're living healthy and have the same sort of, on paper, the same kind of lifestyle as somebody else, unfortunately we're at much higher risk. And then we said that unfortunately with this risk there's also low awareness. So most of the people, in the UK it's about 7 out of 10 people don't know that they have this, so they can't really make changes. We then ended last week on this questionnaire, and we said that what we can do is using simple things like a tape measure and a weighing scale, and 2 minutes of your time, you can work out your risk of prediabetes or diabetes. So generally, because of if you're male, if you're if you're over 40, and if you're of anything other than European white, you probably are already in increased risk. Generally, the recommendation is that if you're an increased risk, you should have your health check done every 5 years to check for the risk of diabetes. It's not the case you have it checked once, it's okay, that means you don't have prediabetes or you don't have diabetes. You need to have it checked regularly because this evolves. We're talking about that slippery slope. If you're in moderate risk, probably you should check every 3 years. And definitely if you're in high risk, you should get it checked straight away, but also probably annually. Even if it comes back normal, annually you probably need to just get it checked, because the sooner you identify it, the sooner obviously you can make changes. And you can see exactly where you are on the scale as well, which is why it's very useful. So the other thing is that we looked at those genetic risks. Now today we're going to just briefly talk about the modifiable risks. So this is if you've got just on paper, if you've got the same lifestyle as anyone else, genetically we're higher predisposed. Now we also know there's other things which make us more likely to have diabetes. Very easy, most people know this. It's to do with exercise, unhealthy eating, and being overweight. There's other things as well which also affect it, things like sleep, things about stress, and other aspects of our lifestyle as well, and the type of food that we have. It's important to know that actually our genetics in the last 50 years, 100 years, 200-300 years hasn't really changed. We've always been at this high risk, but actually the number of cases of diabetes has gone up massively. So if you look, this is in America, in 1980s, there was about 400,000 cases of new diabetes per year. You go forward 30 years, so 1990, 2000, 2010, and there's 4 times that number being diagnosed every year. So we're talking about a 30-year period. The genetics hasn't changed over 30 years, but something's changed over 30 years to make the number of cases 4-fold increase. And we're seeing a similar thing in most Western countries, and now unfortunately because of a lot of imported lifestyle in third world countries and developing countries, which is I think fueled by a lot of multinational corporations going abroad with aid and everything, it means actually a lot of these risks and Western lifestyle risks are being conveyed to other people as well, which was never there before. So it's important to recognize who's at risk, and also things that can be done to prevent prediabetes. And I think this is kind of common knowledge thing, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. We know there's quite a few things that can change your risk. So exercise, healthy diet, quit smoking, healthy body weight, and have a good sleep cycle. But what I want to point out is actually that let me share a bit of evidence with you, because I think this is what might change your minds. And I think this is what I want to end on in terms of our discussion today. So they did a study in Norfolk, which has got a bit less ethnic minorities than general population, but it's still, they did 24,000 people. Well, I mean, the whole study was 100 and so many thousand people. They looked at the people who weren't already diabetic. They looked at people who were 40 to 74, and they got 24,000 people. They told them over 5 years to try and meet one of these targets, or any of these targets. The first is to lose 5% of your weight, or to make sure you have if you're already in a healthy weight, stay in a healthy weight. The second is to reduce your total fat intake, and they said here to less than 30% of your total meal. The other thing is reduce your saturated fat intake. So this is a separate thing to total fat. The fourth is to increase your fiber intake, and the fifth is to increase physical activity to more than 4 hours a week. So these are difficult things to do, but they're achievable. And what I wanted to share the results with you is, which actually surprised me quite a lot. They found, after 5 years, so 24,000 people, if you actually achieved one of these targets, you reduced your risk of developing diabetes by 20%. This is a fair amount. If you followed 2 of these targets, you reduce your risk by 40%. 3 targets, 60%. The people who managed to adhere to all of these 5, absolutely none of them developed diabetes. So, in fact, even if you've got all of the genetic factors, the point is, the reason why before there weren't so many cases of diabetes is a lot to do with our lifestyle. And we know that if we're on that slope, you don't need to ask for medication, you don't need to ask for a miracle cure or a tablet. It's common sense things. But the point is actually being very sort of rigorous with yourself and being adhering to these kind of difficult lifestyle changes and making it part of your life. And we said about it's important to actually label yourself as pre-diabetic, because then actually sometimes psychologically the labeling actually helps you to start making changes to your life. So unfortunately it isn't really that simple, because how many people can take on those 5 things, and how easy is it for us? And I think unfortunately there are a lot of obstacles, a lot of barriers, particularly in our communities, for people to live a healthy lifestyle when it comes to food, when it comes to diet, when it comes to exercise. And I wanted to share a few thoughts that I had, and also I wanted to kind of engage in a little bit of discussion to see if we can also think about what kind of things are barriers for us, and what kind of things do you think are realistically we can change or do to achieve a kind of a better health awareness and promotion of healthy lifestyle, which can be taken on more mainstream in our communities. So some of this was from research that was done by the Aga Khan Health Board, which is for the Ismaili communities in the UK. And since they did this research in 2009, they actually set up a board called the Ismaili Nutrition Center. And I think it's actually a very good resource, and I'll show you a bit of a few clips from that. So these are some of the things which they mentioned as well. So they said that when we're cooking food, generally we cook without measurements. So it's not like a recipe driven. We just know, a bit of this, a bit of that. And it means that when you're trying to modify a recipe or say to somebody, actually, can you cut out the fat? We don't know how much we can change without altering the taste so much. So if you say to somebody, put a bit less salt, well, how do you know how much salt somebody's putting in if you don't have an actual measurement? So they found that actually when they were looking at mostly women cooking in the community, it's difficult to target dietary advice. The second thing is that obviously we have in our culture a lot of hospitality. So we found that people, having a lot of socializing happens around food. And also they're finding in the Aga Khan community particularly, they said that compared to other South Indian communities and other things, that they were finding that more and more people were sort of obliging others to have second helpings, and they'd eat in a way where you'd have your sort of main dishes in the middle of the table, and it'd be like buffet style, which means it's very difficult to control portion size. If you go to any Weight Watchers, Slimming World, any kind of Western dietary advice, and they always tell you about changing your portion size. And for us, it's very difficult to do that because we don't have a set portion size. We don't serve on the plate and give to everybody. Everybody just takes as much as they want. And that's part of our culture. So maybe that's something which we need that's something which makes it a bit harder. Also, we know the access to health services in our community is less. And we also know that women also have more difficulty accessing exercise in sports classes. And that's a lot for obviously cultural reasons and religious reasons. Some of the resources that they did, so this is the website, theismaili.org/nutrition. They've got some resources there, and they actually go through about 150, 200 of our common dishes. So you've got here like batata bhajia, bharto, gajar halwa, and these kind of things which actually they've looked at, and they've had actually given some nutritional information, which is a useful start. And they've also got some ideas about recipes, how you can modify traditional sort of khoja recipes or Indian recipes to make them a bit better in terms of higher fiber, lower salt, lower fat. So these are some of the things that I came across. Last week we did touch a bit on health screening, about the importance of health screening, and we talked about the uptake of these kind of things. We mentioned a bit about these kind of questionnaires, and can we do this on a larger scale? Can we have a post where someone comes in during a Khoshali and we have a station where people go and they register and they clock in and they get their risk score. We know that we have in Courage, or we have a health board as well. I don't know how many people are aware of the work that they do, whether you think that might be something that we can work on. But what I was interested in today, I mean, this is actually the end of the talk, but I was interested in today because we did have quite a nice question and answer session last week, just to discuss a little bit about what you guys think, what we can do in terms of solving this community problem.
So firstly, we should change the way we are giving out food, which is good, but the whole structure of what we are giving out, especially in Niyaz, in the form, even in this Fajr thing, you have to guide us what would be more appropriate, so that going forward we are still being hospitable, but at the same time not very much hard to our own body and health.
Okay, so I think that's interesting, and I don't know how this would actually look like in practice, because if somebody wants to do a niyaz, if somebody wants to hold an event, then you can imagine that it would be a bit difficult, because there are certain dishes that people like to have and which are seen to be quite good. If you start controlling what people can give, people might feel quite bad. If, on the other side, if you increase the general population awareness, then there might be less demand for those, fatty rich or very rich foods, which may be difficult for you. Then it would be easier to limit. But if you start with controlling, then people will probably start complaining about the committee. I'm just thinking in terms of practical, I think it's really, really good, because we actually distribute a lot of food, and a lot of people who come to mosque regularly, a lot of their diets will be affected by what we see. And actually, in terms of the management committee of the mosque, we can set a good example in terms of the food that we give. Some really interesting things were happening sort of in madrasa when they were issuing children packed lunches. They weren't letting the kids bring in their packed lunches. They were issuing them to make sure that they had a role model, they had a sort of something they could see as a good standard packed lunch meal, and how that would look in practice, and they could still feel full with it, and they'd get the good nutrition from it. So sometimes with learning and setting habits in children is quite important. So, I mean, the packed lunch in madrasa is probably one way you can have a good look. The other thing is what we talked about is maybe some kind of control or maybe regulation about the types of food we serve in the mosque.
I mean, Fajr would be just a good example, because we are now doing all this program in Fajr, and most of the people are aware of what we are talking and educating themselves. And the fact that we've got donors who are giving the money and leaving the distribution of what we buy or what we serve is at the disposal of the management of the Fajr committee.
Yeah.
So we have got that opportunity to do it. And this could be on a smaller scale, because Fajr is not a big scale of the community, but a picture of what we're trying to introduce into the mainstream.
So that's a very good point. So if we started on a small scale with something where we can control, something like in the Fajr Niyaz, maybe starting at that small scale and seeing how it actually looks, and people being able to understand, how it would feel, and how it would, the fact that we're not really sacrificing that much in terms of taste, but we're just looking for different healthier recipes. That's certainly an option. Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Instead of chicken korma, you could have the exercise.
That is on top of that. But you can remove the chicken and bring something more easier thing.
So I'm just going to go back to that.
Sorry?
Back to our original diet that used to have
True.
continental food.
Yeah.
No fried eggs.
No fried eggs.
No fried.
Okay. Can I get a suggestion from the ladies, please? So, what do you guys think I mean, practically, if we're just brainstorming what kind of ideas we can do to try and improve the
I think
situation.
example is in the plane, when we're traveling in the plane, what we get for breakfast. That's what we want here.
So,
Fruits and, juice fast.
yeah. So, example was given about the kind of meals you'd get in a plane. So it's a pre-prepared, the portions are already set, it's a balanced diet, and that kind of thing. You can actually really control what people are getting in terms of the calories, in terms of the balanced nutrition, and that's a way that you can maybe see things going forward. I don't know how what were you thinking about how to implement that? You mean in the community or
In the Fajr namaz.
in Fajr namaz, like having pre-set meals?
Everybody will follow after that.
Okay.
I think we should just fast maybe. Regularly, not only in Ramadan. If you fast twice a week, I think that could. Because during Ramadan, you find people have lost weight and they feel better.
So actually, it's really interesting. So Jean-Paul, that's a really good point because you were talking about fasting, and there is a lot of solutions that people would give when it comes to things like improving your diet. But actually, in our religion, we have a lot of really good resources and really good guidance. And in some ways, because we're a religious-based community center, we can use that as a focus to try and change things. And certainly fasting, I mean, you said that when people fast, they lose weight, they have a bit of a healthier lifestyle. And actually, you know what, in fasting itself, very specifically, there's a lot very unique about the way we fast and the way that we fast, particularly between dawn and dusk, not just, 18 hours at any other time. The fact that it's synchronized with this and how that interacts with the way our hormones change during the day, it actually has a very profound impact on our insulin levels. And during that month, if you had a look, beforehand, if you tested somebody's level of insulin resistance and afterwards, it would change quite a lot, even if you compare it to other fasting diets. So there's a lot of actually hidden knowledge inside the practices that we have, which you're right, we can actually capitalize on this. And I think that's really quite good. And maybe when people are fasting, like for example in Ramadan, we can have a talk about the science behind fasting or something like that to try and help people to understand and understand that actually fasting is a tool you can use outside of Ramadan as well and encourage that more. So I think that's really useful.
The only fear is fasting on the basis of health and not taking into the wajibat thing. Normally, Ramadan we are fasting, fine. On other days, obviously, if I say I'm praying, I'm fasting because of the religious purpose, you get more so. But if you do it on the whole thing, just the point of to bring it right now.
Yeah, I think you're right, Murtaza Uncle, because actually you can look at it two ways. You can look at, for example, the science behind the religion. But unfortunately, if you then make that your aim and your intention changes and you're doing it for the health, and actually it's really surprising because if you look at things like prayer, if you look at things like, just having the Jamaat namaz and how much Jamaat namaz is promoted, and you actually look at the health and psychological benefits of prayer, the specific positions that you have in prayer, the specific things you're reciting, and some of the scientific evidence that's come about this, I mean, it actually makes you feel like you want to pray even if you're not Muslim. So in some ways, you don't want to also then change your intention. But in some ways, it also helps you to achieve better certainty in faith and helps you to, in some ways, it can help you to realize the sort of the treasure that we're sitting on in some ways. So,
They sort out the breath problems. It's been proved by these,
Yeah.
other communities. Namaz has sorted out a lot of problems.
Yeah.
Knee problems, back problems.
I think, yeah, and I think that's the thing. If we should talk about some of the benefits of the religious practices, but we have to be careful not to change the focus, and so we have to deliver it in a sensitive way. We're not trying to prove the religion; we're just trying to help the health of the community as well. So, any other suggestions?
On the whole, this note, what I just thought, sharing my thought with the rest of the Fajr people here, is from Monday onwards to Friday, we are now trying to introduce fruits as the Fajr, food intake, rather than bringing all this fried East African menu.
Zishan, you'll get the blame for that.
Another tradition is in Ramadan, instead of ordering samosas and bhajiyas and all that, fruits is, just set meals like, what we provided in the plane, like it's, I think that's I know it's going to be extra expense, but it's worth looking into it.
So these two suggestions are more based on fruits, including fruits as part of our niyaz, as part of our regular programs, because fruit doesn't really feature in many of our, in many of our meals, and that's very true. Whenever people give, when they have Fatiha, at the front, when we're on the way out, like at Jummah, then there are sometimes fruits, but very often there isn't. And perhaps we could even have to make sure that when people are donating, we recommend that these are the things that we'd like people to give for Fatiha. I mean, a lot of these, the thing is, it's good to start big and to start unrealistic and then start whittling it down and thinking about practical things. We did talk a little bit about health awareness last week, and we did talk a bit about screening programs. We have had screening programs in the community, but obviously they're mixed success. They're not always fantastically attended. Those who do attend get, have a really good service, and of those, people are made aware of a lot of health risks. But is there other ways that you think guys can think about maybe how we can change the way we do health screening, health awareness?
Yeah. There's a lot of confidentiality is needed, because you know what, I've come so many times and people know what I'm suffering with, and that puts you off completely,
I think
confidentiality. Whoever is doing it, who is it on the board,
I think with
they should respect that.
within our entire community, we are tend to be very secretive. This is something that's natural. We wouldn't even tell somebody we are going for ziyarah, something like that. This is how we are. So a suggestion would be that the doctors, you guys, need to maybe go to house,
What's wrong with
and
my
do the
body?
screening.
It's my problem.
Make a big project out of it, and go give them a one-to-one. Then so they can, or you go with people who are not of the community. It's our nature to be secretive. It's sad that we are like that, because we should be sharing our problems, and so that but we don't.
Yeah, so Siraj was just saying, and I think it was also voiced on the ladies' side, about the fact that with the health screenings, it's really important that we maintain confidentiality, because that's often an obstacle to people actually coming and divulging their problems, because as a community we generally tend to be a bit more secretive. A sort of suggestion was that perhaps the health professionals within the community, or people who have certain standards when it comes to confidentiality, maybe they can take a bigger role, because if you have a lot of these health screening programs run by volunteers, there's not always the trust, and not out of sort of, not on purpose, but perhaps through that way, people's health issues may get known about, which isn't always a good idea.
But the way I'm looking at it is a different angle. Because by letting know the people what illness I have, somebody sitting next to me has got the same. So then we can in fact sit and create a network of people with the similar illnesses and share their habits and their problems. Well, why
It's very
secret?
personal,
What's secret about it? I don't know. Because we are,
That is very
our
personal.
illness is on our face.
If you want to share, it's your
Yeah, but this awareness should be brought up.
your choice.
Those who want not to share, which is fine.
Yeah.
But there's nothing to hide. At the end of the day, we go from here to the graveyard, even the Jamaat taxes. When we are dead, it is announced all over. This person is dead. We are not secretive then. But we are secretive while going towards the graveyard. Because every day we are becoming ill, because we are going to the graveyard. But the day we go to the graveyard, we make it a big ho-ha. Oh, he's not dead, and let's go and drop him. But while we go, let's go slowly, and we share the growth of the movement to the graveyard.
So what is Uncle saying about actually, by sharing our health problems, it can actually help us to learn from each other and work together. And to be honest, this is a very tried and tested method which is used in sort of Western medicine and even here in the NHS. If you go for any weight loss program or anything, they show in studies that if you go by yourself or if you go with a group of people who are experiencing the same problem as you, if you go in a group, you're much, much more likely to achieve your goals. And the thing is, you actually feel that you're going through the problem together. And also, there's a big scope for third sector charities. They have societies, they have health forums. You know, online you can see people sharing solutions to problems. And it doesn't have to always be health professionals giving it, because you actually learn a lot from each other and somebody in a similar position. Whereas, for example, me as a health professional, if I don't have diabetes, maybe I can't give you the same advice because you're living with it, you know? Maybe somebody who's living with diabetes for 10 years, they've got more to share practically than somebody like myself. So I think there's definitely benefit to sharing it, but obviously we have to think about how to do that whilst maintaining confidentiality.
It's your choice, isn't it? It's a personal choice.
It is, but for example, if you could imagine if we had something like, if we had an online, if Courage had a health board, and in the health board you had different portals for things like diabetes, and if you had health forums, you could choose to be anonymous, you could choose maybe not to be anonymous, and that kind of thing maybe allows you to interact in a way where you can still benefit from people within the community. You can share, you know, other tips and advice without having to disclose your problems, because in some way the internet can be a useful tool, and we can actually have very personalized and customized information and guidance to people. I was going to say that one of the other things that the Ismaili community are doing is that when anybody dies, you talked about the problem with confidentiality, and you also talked about when the funerals happen, that it's obviously the Jamaat that's very involved, that it's very intimate because they wash the body, they prepare the body, and they take it to the funeral. What they do is they actually make a record of what's on the death certificate. So each Jamaat and the whole centralized Aga Khan Health Board knows exactly which diseases people in the whole community are dying from, which diseases are more prevalent, which comorbidities are there. It's a way of getting it in, and in some ways, from a health professional point of view, firstly, you need to have the data, because once you get the data, you identify what the problems are, and then you can start targeting things. And you can say, actually, it's better to put £100 in this pot against diabetes or £100 into this pot depression, because you don't really know, because some of these are under the surface and some of these people won't share till later. So I think from a health professional point of view, I think data collection is a huge thing that we could do, but we have to think about how we do it to make it sensitive, to make it sort of in a trustworthy and confidential way. So I think that's something that I agree with that the Ismaili community are doing.
You know, you spoke about the possible of reversing is that possible from type 2 diabetes, that it can be reversed?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just going to say the question is about, can you actually reverse type 2 diabetes? Now, the thing is that once diabetes is established, it's harder. The further you're along the scale, the harder it is to reverse. But there's very clear evidence to show that you can reverse type 2 diabetes. And I'll give you a very quick piece of evidence. Have you heard about bariatric surgery, the weight loss surgery? So sometimes people who are overweight and they're struggling to lose weight, they have their stomach, either a band put on it, so the stomach's a bit smaller, or they have a little bit of the gut cut out. And what's changed recently is that the NHS is funding this, okay? And they didn't used to fund it before. It used to have to be private. There's some centres, Birmingham do it, the Luton do it, in London they do it. And one of the big things that changed a few years ago, which is why the NHS did it, is because there's so much burden of evidence to show that actually when they did this, a lot of these people who are overweight and diabetic, it actually within a few months, the blood sugar levels came to normal and they stopped being diabetic. And that was partly to do with the weight loss that they achieved. So we are talking about dramatic changes. And sometimes people have to go all the way to surgery to get those dramatic results. But you can actually see in the population who are definitely established diabetes, the highest risk people, it can be reversed. And it is reversed. And even in less risk people, it's day by day, you know, it comes and changes. I see patients who have been diagnosed with diabetes, we monitor them every year, and actually they made significant changes in their lifestyle, and their blood sugars are actually normal. So definitely when you're on the starting scale, it's easier, but definitely even in in the established type 2 diabetes at the severe end, if you're ready to make those changes, it will change because it's a lot of it to do with lifestyle.
Then I would say that it would be a good idea to target people from within the community who are suffering from type 2 diabetes, and so the hook would be how to reverse your, at least try to reverse your diabetes, and if you can actually get some results on that, that'd be something which will be easy to sell for the whole community.
So Shabiranko is putting a really interesting thing. He's saying that why don't we have intensive programs targeting people who are at the highest risk within the community and actually showing that we can make significant changes, and that will then spread the message. So we're talking about targeted, intensive interventions, yeah? So maybe this is a course over sort of 6, 7, 8 weeks with professional fitness trainer, some dietary advice, some exercise, and maybe the community can afford to put some resources into here because actually maybe it's better than some of the things we put money into because we're really talking about the health community and these messages can spread. What I will say though is that we talked about the fact that in diabetes there's probably, what we said, there was about 4 million people in the UK who's got established type 2 diabetes. There's about 7 or 8 million people who are here. If we want to capture all these people over here, the 20 million or something, and in our community probably we're looking at, maybe 5% of our population are diabetic, maybe 40% of the population are pre-diabetic, maybe 60% of the target population is above normal glucose. If you target these 5% of people, and maybe within that you target a handful of people, you can make some changes. But if you do something community-wide, if you do a health program, the same, how much is it going to cost to do an intensive lifestyle thing? Maybe it'll cost you £1,000, £2,000 per person. If you put that £8,000, £10,000 that you're going to give to 4 people, intensive, and if you put that into a good health awareness campaign, health promotion, if we think about implementing some guidelines in the Jamaat, making some constitutional changes, then you could actually affect 60% of your Jamaat rather than the 1 or 2%. And in the NHS, it's difficult because they talk about how much can you fund each person. So they do it on 2 sides. They actually look at the most extreme end of the spectrum. They do invest, definitely, but they also do a lot of public health. And they find that for every £1 you spend increasing the awareness in the whole population, you save £10 later down the line because you prevent the onset of diabetes. You can treat those 4, but next year you'll get another 10. The next year you'll get another 20 who are coming down this line. So if you don't stop the slope, then it's difficult. So I think you have to match it because you also have to see that these are the people most at need on this side. These people aren't in the most need, but this is where it's most cost effective. So you have to kind of also balance that out.
Public health are now spending an awful lot of money in the area of healthy living. And people who want to change their lifestyle, i.e. they want to lose weight or healthy eating and everything, the 5 things you highlighted, they're actually funding that, and all of that is free, and anybody who wants to access that, they will give you all the advice. They'll monitor you over the period of time. It's all free, and if there are enough people from within the community here, I can actually get them to come here because at the moment they're based in Al Iqbal Centre, so where they are there every day. So it's stopping smoking, it's losing weight, improving your diet, just being aware about what you're eating and how you can change your lifestyle. And I tell you, if I told them that there were 20 people here willing to sign on, they'd be here like a shop.
Yeah. So Shabiranko was saying that actually there are a lot of resources that we probably aren't aware about, things which are being offered by the government for free, and also programs, and you mentioned specifically resources for accessing intensive interventions when it comes to stopping smoking and dietary and fitness related things, which actually, if we had a cohort of people within the Jamaat that we identified would be open to this, then we could actually make arrangements for somebody to come and visit and deliver this intervention.
Or come to Al Iqbal Centre, it's there anyway.
Yeah.
But the important thing of sharing this information is so important. I have realized in the past couple of years, while so much of psychological and mental health awareness has come, even because I read the Sunday Times and things like that, and in that even the Queen, her mother-in-law, how ill she was, how psychology, the whole history is coming, and that's open. Some of the MPs, they are coming. We have got a psychological problem because this. So the sharing is becoming so awareness. The psychology, which was a taboo before, and it was just something we were putting in the bin. But now it's come up and it's a realization of. So the thing is, sharing is so important. I myself, when I got some of my illnesses, we go as a group and meet together with the health, and we share our thoughts and the experience.
One quick thing I wanted to say about the packed lunch for madrasa students. It is important that we target the young at a young age. Do you do any talk at madrasa with the teachers and with the students? Because I think the younger they are, the better it is. They get it in their head. When they grow up, they know that this is our. So I think that's also one of the big target is our madrasa students.
Yeah. Habibanka, you're quite right. Actually, the thing is they find out that actually when people go through schooling these days, they learn some academic skills. They don't learn about life skills. And in some ways, it's the role of madrasa to patch the learning that the school doesn't give. And a big proportion of this learning that you can really give to children that can change their life is how to self-care for their health, how to learn about how to deal with relationships properly, how to treat your brothers, your sisters, and this. And that's kind of what we teach a little bit in madrasa, which school doesn't teach, about how to respect each other, how to respect your elders. So why not even how to respect yourself, how to respect your body, and how to respect your own health? So you're talking about the packed lunches being a good intervention and trying to give talks and awareness at the stages when children are younger. I don't want to drag on because I know it's getting a bit late. So maybe we'll finish here. But I wanted to just kind of open up the discussion a little bit, and maybe we do need to. I'll write down some of these ideas, and I don't know what's going to happen in future, but it might be useful to. I'm not really in touch with the Co-Age Health Awareness Committee or something, so maybe I can speak to them. I can speak to a few people who are on the health committee at the Jamaat, and maybe we should have a bit of a sit down and a think about this, and maybe a community consultations as well, to work out what the community feel is important and what changes people are willing to take on. Because it can't just be from top down. It has to be, in some ways, the demand has to be there to make the change, and it should be bottom up.